when the man would lose the farm, lose the house, there was often a huge change in his personality, in his point of view, in his participation level, in society, in his community, and especially within his family. There were many, many cases of men going into severe depression, seeking escape in alcoholism, seeking escape in leaving the family and leaving the wife to fend for herself.
I just blowed in and I got them Dust Bowl blues. I just blowed in and I got them Dust Bowl blues. I just blowed in and I'll blow back out again. I guess you've heard about every kind of blues. I guess you've heard about every kind of blues. But when the dust gets high, you can't even see the sky. I've seen the dust so black that I couldn't see a thing. I've seen the dust so black that I couldn't see a thing. And the wind so cold, boy, it nearly cut your water off. I've seen the wind so high that it blowed my fences down.
The year is 1930. There are many wide-ranging themes that come together when observing the tragedy, humanity, migration, workers' rights, and hope for a better world within the Grapes of Wrath, the Great Depression, and its impact on the land. The financial hardship that also connect to similar experiences seen today with the economical hardships felt by the coronavirus pandemic. How are people's struggles today relatable to the Joad situation? Reception to Steinbeck's work was met with much controversy, which criticized the mistreatment of small farms by big companies, angering the Associated Farmers of California, and was banned. John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath highlights the disastrous drought of the 1930s, which forced multiple farmers and their families to migrate westward to California, pitting migrants against locals and property owners against those suffering and vulnerable. Its themes, which consist of ecological catastrophes, financial collapse, poverty, and discrimination at all levels. These are all themes that still resonate today. Migrants are poorly treated in The Grapes of Wrath, which touches on the theme of inhuman mistreatment and murder. Policeman murders Casey. Through all the dark days, cinema changed and took a positive turn.
I had to get a steam shovel just to dig my darling out. These dusty blues are the dustiest ones I know. These dusty blues are the dustiest ones I know. Buried head over heels in the black old dust. I had to pack up and go, and I just blowed in, and I'll soon blow out again. On the 14th day of April of 1935, there struck the worst of dust storms that ever filled the sky. You could see that dust storm coming, the cloud looked death-like black, and through our mighty nation it left a dreadful track. From Oklahoma City to the Arizona line, Dakota and Nebraska to the lazy Rio It fell across our city like a curtain of black rolled down. We thought it was our judgment, we thought it was our doom. The radio reported, we listened with alarm, the wild and windy actions of this great mysterious storm. From Albuquerque and Clovis and all New Mexico, they said it was the blackest that ever they had saw. From old Dodge City, Kansas, the dust had rung their knell, and a few more comrades sleeping on top of old Boot Hill. From Denver, Colorado, they said it blew so strong, they thought that they could hold out, but they didn't know how long. Our relatives were huddled into their oil boom shacks, and the children, they was crying as it whistled through the cracks. And the family, it was crowded into their little room. They thought the world had ended, and they thought it was their doom. The storm took place at sundown, it lasted through the night. When we looked out next morning, we saw a terrible sight. We saw outside our window where wheat fields they had grown was now a rippling ocean of dust the wind had blown. It covered up our fences, it covered up our barns, it covered up our tractors in this wild and dusty storm. We loaded our jalopies and piled our families in. We rattled down that highway to never come back again.
John Steinbeck wrote in 1939, his goal for the Grapes of Wrath was to rip a reader's nerves to rags. Through the novel, Steinbeck wanted readers to experience the life of the Dust Bowl and the migrants with whom he had spent time with. The Grapes of Wrath in name is a biblical allusion or reference to the book of Revelations in the Bible. Passage 14:19 through 20, which reads, So the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters from the vine of the earth and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Tamara Rumbold states in her article that in the Bible story, the days and nights are clearly demarcated. For the sun and moon have power to rule and to give adequate light. Note the italicized passages in Steinbeck's narrative. The sun no longer can give enough light to create day, and the dusky day blends imperceptibly into night. For Steinbeck, the beating rays retain only the power to dry and destroy, not to lighten the day. Even the stars cannot pierce the dust to shed light. Steinbeck incorporates imagery from 3 Old Testament journeys. Steinbeck uses traditional biblical material and at the same time breaks out of the traditional interpretation of that material to look at new possibilities by concluding his novel with a woman concretely sharing her very self with a stranger. She also quotes, Steinbeck synthesizes the vision of Isaiah, in which the new heavens and the new earth are seen as overturning the present realities, with the vision of Ecclesiastes in which cooperative effort is seen as the hope of the people. Steinbeck's wrath, however, isn't directed at the weather, but at those who abuse the power that they possess. Banks chase farmers out of their homes with debt, and businessmen exploit migrant labor and disband unions. Steinbeck's America paired governance and capitalism, while the majority labored for the sake of the profit for the wealthy.
Often we travel the long road with great big cars and heavy loads.
My mother tells is that the rolling truck would come to their farm once a week, and if they had worked hard for their family that week, they got one egg. Each child, there was 12 children, they got one egg, and when the truck came, they could trade that egg for a piece of candy. And my mother tells to this day how good that candy tasted because that was the only candy they got for another whole week.
And something to call our own. Home, home in a government camp, so won't have to be called a tramp. How often at night when the heavens are bright, we'll think of something to do. How often we travel the long road with great big cars and heavy loads. How often we traveled alone with nothing to do but sing some old lazy song. Home, give us a home so we won't have to roam, a place to call our own, with something overhead and something for bed and something to call our own. Home, home in a government camp, so won't have to be called a tramp. How often at night when the heavens are bright, we'll think of something to do.
The house next door was rented mostly by families from Oklahoma. One family built a small square shack behind the house using rolls of roofing material to cover the outside walls, and migrant families would live in the shack for a while before moving somewhere else looking for work. Our house was close to the railroad tracks, and I remember men knocking on our back door asking for water and something to eat. My mom would make them a bologna sandwich and white bread. Back then, these men were not called homeless people, but were called hobos or tramps that rode the trains.
Iconic photography taken by Horace Bristol when traveling with John Steinbeck, when they were observing California, interviewing and making photographs of migrants living in labor camps for a collaborative book-length project which would ultimately be The Grapes of Wrath. Dorothea Lange is most notable during this time for her iconic photographs of the Great Depression, and she felt it was important to evoke a need for social change through her work. One very famous photograph is of a man turned away from the hungry crowd. His interlaced hands and set jaw often take as representative of a collective despair. In early 1935, on Taylor's recommendation, Lange began to work for the California State Emergency Relief Administration. It was that summer that the agency was transferred to the RA, which had recently begun a photo documentary project to draw attention to the plight of the rural poor. In 1937, the RA would become the Farm Security Administration. The photograph that became known as Migrant Mother was established in the paper the following day on March 11th of 1937. Accompanying the editorial read, "What does the New Deal mean to this mother and her children?" The Wizard of Oz within itself is a journey of a young girl trying to find her way home. But the symbolism behind the film is the journey and the struggle of the American people during the Great Depression. The Wizard of Oz was out in the same year. Kansas was the location. Dorothy's home is also significant because it is the victim of the Dust Bowl. Most southern states had been affected by drought and wind-blown dust, which made it hard to farm. It was due to this there was an agricultural decline which prolonged the Depression. The opening scene of the film shows Dorothy on the farm, which is the middle of the country, surrounded by dry, unfarmable soil. Kansas, which is Dorothy's home, is the ultimate victim. Symbolism within the film. With much analysis, The Wizard of Oz is a representation full of symbolism and themes that tie closely to the events of the Great Depression. Dorothy is believed to represent the American people and its values, as she is resourceful. Toto, Dorothy's small dog, is the one to reveal what a fraud the wizard is, thought to also represent average Americans. Uncle Henry, which was who was the editor of a farming magazine at the time. The tornado was thought to represent the political upheaval that took place during the Dust Bowl. American farmers were suffering the effects of the economic turmoil as they were getting less money for their crops. The Munchkins are the little people who represent the common man. It can also be seen as representing child labor. Unlike the film where the slippers are ruby, in the original novel they are silver. Silver is related to the political issues which America was facing at the time. Farmers wanted to have the value of the dollar at fixed ratio for silver and gold. The yellow brick road is the gold path leading to power. The Wicked Witch of the West are the politicians who oppressed the farmers by supporting the free silver campaigns. The Good Witch of the North are the American people from the north and south of the country. These are those who battled against Western American industries. The Scarecrow symbolized the Western farmers of America. The Tin Man symbolizes the industrial workers. The Tin Man was immobile and rusted, which is the feeling the workers had as the Great Depression started to close down factories and businesses. And finally, the Cowardly Lion is the politician William Jennings Bryan, who supported the free silver movement, and some say he had a loud roar, but no power or bite.
At MGM, the question was how to bring this classic to the screen without destroying its magical qualities. Well, it finally required the combined efforts of 14 writers and 5 directors to capture Baum's vision on film.
The Resettlement Administration has loaned millions to farmers whose lands were not damaged beyond repair, but who needed seed, farm equipment, and credit in order to carry on. Most important, the Resettlement Administration is taking over 4,500 farms in the drought area, and it will move families from this land that cannot be farmed into natural agricultural districts.
Let me tell you how it was. I don't care who describes that to you. Nobody can tell it any worse than what it was. And no one exaggerates that. There is no way for it to be exaggerated. It was that bad.
It was just unbelievable. It'd blister your face. It would put your eyes out. Well, I guess I can't describe it. It was just constant, just that steady blow of dirt.
As far as you could see, there was a dust storm coming right towards you. This giant wall just coming towards you. And you still had the feeling, whether you would admit it, that something was going to run over you and just crush you.
It was almost surreal. The dust. There's nowhere you can run. You can try to get out of it, but it's as if it follows you, follows you, follows you. You can't escape it. Looking back on it, I think it carried with it a feeling of, I don't know the word exactly, of, well, being unreal, but almost being evil.